Wealth builders always see a future that is bigger than their past. So they take a look at where they've been. They say, okay, it's actually worked out pretty well, but I've reset my goals now.
This is Wealth Smarts, where you will gain the financial capabilities and confidence to achieve the goals that matter to you. Now, here are your hosts, Richard and Matt.
The next question on our Wealth Builder Scorecard. Are you making regular progress towards your goals? Richard?
You know, the progress isn't always going to be regular, okay? But on average, we need to be moving forward. And even if we're moving backwards, I think it can teach us things. I love stories about the US military, okay? In that everybody does an after action review after they've had a military exercise, if they've had an engagement of some sort. They take a look at, and it's a learning that every corporation can use. They take a look at what happened, what went well, what didn't, what steps can we take to make sure that those negative events doesn't happen again. What's the strategy that we put in place? What is the system that we put in place to make sure that it's a positive experience going forward? You know, so the regular progress, I would say, is just taking action. That's the important thing. We're not going to necessarily have a positive result each time, but taking regular action is critical in achieving our goals.
And I would say there's one step before these questions, which is actually you need to have goals.
Yeah.
So that's pretty important to be able to achieve them, is you need to have them, which makes sense, I guess. But anyways, that question, are you making regular progress towards your goals? The first response, I've given up on achieving my goals. And that is heartbreaking for me to hear, because I know in many examples, it's not because the person's actually given up. It's just because they've experienced so many negatives that they don't really see hope.
Can I give an example?
Sure.
My heart goes out to the younger generation now, okay? Especially in Canada, with real estate prices being the way they are, especially in major metropolitan areas, in that it's so tempting for young people to give up hope because interest rates are sky high. Well, they're not as high as they were when we bought our first place, I'll tell you that. But to make matters worse, real estate prices are really, really high and unaffordable. And the underwriting rules in order to get a mortgage to get into a place have become more onerous. And, you know, the opportunities just seem to be eluding this generation. Now, I take a look at that and say, okay, well, where is the actual progress? Okay, at that age, you know, in let's just say the 1980s, 1990s for me, I didn't have a mobile phone, a mobile device on which I had the answers to almost anything that I could possibly want to ask. I wasn't able to learn all about mortgage underwriting rules. I wasn't able to shop for mortgage rates. I wasn't able to actually shop for real estate online. I wasn't able to learn how to plan my financial affairs so that I can put down a down payment towards my first place. Like, so this generation right now has a whole bunch of tools that they never ever had before. And that's where we start. There's the progress right there. So there's always hope in whatever station of life people find themselves. Is we just have to look for the wins. We have to look for the things that can help us.
And just to go back to that real estate example and losing of hope, I feel like there's that it's an area where we need to be realistic. Like, unfortunately, most people will never own a detached house, right? And I feel like that's been a dream that's been touted as being the dream for so long. Oh, you have a property, right? But what I know and what I've seen with many of the people that we've worked with is that they started and then they built up to being able to afford a small property or like an apartment. And then they continued to build up equity. And then they maybe moved into a townhouse, and then they kept building up equity, and maybe they didn't need to upsize, and maybe they were fine in an apartment, right? Or a condo or a townhouse. So there's the path looks different now than what it used to. There used to be opportunity to get right into a detached house. And I feel like we can't be discouraged by the fact of, okay, we still need to start somewhere, right? We still need to just start.
Yeah. The temptation in a state like that, if you're stuck in, I've given up on achieving my goals, the temptation can just be, hey, let's just seize the day, you know, and not worry too much about the future because there's no hope about the future anyway. Okay.
Mhm.
We can't slip into that.
So back to that question, are you making regular progress towards your goals? The second option is, I feel like I'm making progress, but I have no clear way of knowing how well or what progress I'm making. And
Mhm.
this is the importance of, number one, setting your goals. But in our situation, it's helping clients to see their progress by doing these continual check ins. I love the fact that we have regular meetings with our clients, because I love to use it as an example of saying, okay, you need to check in. We need to check in. As we're walking up to this beautiful vista, there are these markers that we need to follow. And those markers are each check in that we do, right? And every time we're checking in, we make sure that we're still on the path. And the nice thing is, we can make course corrections sooner than maybe waiting until we're completely off the path, right? We can verify, like, okay, still on track. Just keep going. Just keep going. So that's where I feel like a lot of the frustration is just like not working with a system where we can actually measure our progress and see where we're going. And this is where like dashboards are so effective, KPI, key performance indicators are so
Yep.
effective, and checkpoints are so important on that journey to achieving your goals.
Yeah. I love the dashboards that we use because it doesn't really tell us a whole lot, but it tells us one important thing. My retirement is 130% funded. Or the money that we need to fund this European vacation coming up is 100% funded. My children's education is 100% funded, right?
Well, and I would add a caveat to that. I would say 100% funded, given that we continue doing these action items
Yes,
that,
for
right?
sure,
So
for
just
sure. Yeah,
just to give
yeah.
more clarity there.
Not
But
just
anyway,
by default, it's been the result of some purposeful systems that we've put in place. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So another thing on this point of, are you making regular progress towards your goals? The third answer is, I'm satisfied with my progress so far.
Yeah. When you're at that point, there's a principle we call, and I learned this from Strategic Coach, the gap and the gain. The gap is when we take a look at the goals that we had in the past and recognize that, you know what? I haven't achieved that goal. And we fall into the gap because we see this gap between where we are now and where we wanted to be at this point, and it seems insurmountable. Okay. But we neglect to look backwards and answer the question, how far have we come? And then we look backwards and we see, and it's important to look backwards here and we say, actually, we've made a lot of progress. Not the progress we want, but we actually made this progress. What do we need to do now in order to make the future progress? So the gain is what happens when we make that decision to move forward, knowing what we know about the past. So people in that stage of I'm satisfied with my progress so far, they're not in the gap, but they're not in the gain either. They're just happy with where they are right now. And like, I can't be judgmental about that. That might actually be okay for a lot of people. For wealth builders, though, wealth builders always see a future that is bigger than their past. So they take a look at where they've been and they say, okay, it's actually worked out pretty well, but I've reset my goals now. And it's okay to want something more just because you want it. It might be okay to want something more because your goals have gotten bigger, but you just keep on expanding that future. If you're in that point 3 where you're satisfied with your progress so far, you don't wanna make any more progress, you're not in the gap, but you're not in the gain either, and you're happy with where you are, God bless you. That's fine. But understand that that's not the mindset of a wealth builder. And if it's your purpose to become a wealth builder, then you have to take a look at looking at the gain of where you wanna go next, okay?
And the final question or final response to the question, are you making regular progress towards your goals, is I'm regularly improving my progress in step with my ever evolving financial plan. And this really celebrates looking backward at the progress we're making, but also continuously updating your financial plan, your evolving financial plan. We always say this, like once a financial plan is published, it's already out of date
Yep.
because we're using previous information always. And it's important to continuously keep that up to date, number one, but also realize that our goals are continuously going to change.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. The explorers, hundreds of years ago, took a look at wanting to go around the world to find an alternate route to get to all of the riches that were in Southeast Asia. They didn't realize that there was a continent in the way called North and South America, okay? But they got there and they readjusted their goals, okay? They landed there and everything was good. What's the next goal? Well, we didn't end up in China. We ended up in North America. What do we make of this opportunity now? And they ended up finding a bunch of gold, and I don't wanna get into all of the rest of the stuff because it can
Yeah.
be kinda nasty, but they found new goals.
But anyway, so again, we always use the example of the horizon,
Yeah,
right? Like setting your goal as the horizon. Your horizon will always change. But I think with this question, it's very important to say, hey, let's look backward and see how far we've come, but also how much further we have to go.
yeah.
So that big question, are you making regular progress towards your goals? Go take the Smart Wealth Builder score and find if you are.
And if you haven't done it yet, it's time, okay? We've been reminding you about this for a while now, but if you haven't taken it, encourage your friends to take this. We wanna get as much data on that scoreboard database as we can, seeing what people's wealth builder scores are. And, in the future, perhaps we can give people sort of a breakdown of, how people scored on it depending on age and all that sort of stuff. But take your wealth builder score.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Wealth Smarts. Wealth Smarts is a joint production between Wealth Smart Incorporated and Lion's Den Media. Be sure to check out the show notes and our website for more information and resources. If you enjoyed this episode or found it valuable, consider joining the Wealth Smarts community by subscribing and leaving us a review. Your support helps us make more valuable content and reach more listeners like you. See you in 2 weeks.